Wake up, NHL fans. It is Tuesday, and we had some great action around the league last night as the New York Islanders and New York Rangers both won their games. But we got a great morning cup of hockey today. We're going to be joined by Frank Seravalli. In a couple minutes here, we're going to talk about Peter Laviolette's reaction to the Nathan MacKinnon goal last night. We're going to talk about Pierre Engvall and the Leafs victory, and the Islanders victory, over the Leafs. We'll get into Sheldon Keefe, talk about all that, talk about BU over BC in the Beanpot. But alongside Colby Cohen, I'm Jonny Lazarus, and we are brought to you by Seagram's VO Select Canadian Whiskey, which is artfully blended and impeccably crafted. Make it your very own. Colby, you've got a blank stare on your face. What's going on with you this morning?
Are you tired? You sound tired.
I just botched that whole intro, didn't I?
I mean, that was a rough way to welcome people into our show.
Rough.
That was like
that was pretty bad.
That sounded like you were reading a hostage card. You were a little flat there. You were a little tired. Yep. You look tired. You got some bags under your eyes.
I am a little tired. Yeah, it's been what?
You need to get yourself some rest today, pal. I'm gonna start being a little worried about you. I know you got a hectic schedule over the next couple of weeks. So when maybe a little matzo ball soup and a couple hour nap today, maybe a little sauna, a little rejuvenation. The last couple of days, I've gone and sat in an infrared sauna for about an hour, 3 straight days in a row because I was feeling a little bit worn down and under the weather. And today I feel so much better. So,
I got back from Toronto at 9:30 Sunday night, and then yesterday, I went to the Abs morning skate, then came back, started doing some writing. I did get a nap in, which was nice. Then I went to the game and then finished my story late last night, so I didn't get to bed till midnight last night. So I'm still catching up here on sleep, but today will be a rest and recovery day after I get some work done this morning. That's for sure. And I will have a nice dinner thanks to your wife, Alex. So I appreciate that. Shout out, Alex. That's very nice of her to.
Oh, yeah. Where are you going to dinner tonight? Why don't you plug the restaurant at least?
Yeah, I'm going to dinner at Catch, which is, I've only been twice. It's, one of the most popular restaurants in all of New York City, and a lot of the NHL players go when they come to town.
Who are you going with? Don't leave us cliffhanging.
I'm going with a couple friends that I went to UMass with, my roommate from college, George Mika, and then Mitchell Chafee, who's currently on the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are in town taking on the Rangers tomorrow night, and then Zach Jones, who's currently on the Rangers right now after last night's game.
Is Chafee the kid did he transfer to UMass from St. Lawrence? No.
That was
the guy that Harvey brought in with him.
That was Pritchard.
Okay,
Pritchard,
got it. So Chafee, was he drafted by Tampa Bay? Mitchell Chafee, right? National champion.
I think he was drafted by not a national champion. He played till 2019, then signed. He was the captain, but I think he was
on the team that lost to Duluth in the Frozen Four in Buffalo.
Yeah.
I think that was my first Frozen Four. I did that game. I remember that
probably.
game.
Yeah, he scored a goal against Denver in the semifinal, that 5-on-3 goal where the goalie was 10 feet out of the net. Chafee buried home the empty one, but I think he was drafted by Minnesota. Pretty sure he was drafted.
So he's how long has he been playing pro hockey for?
This is, I think, year 3 or year 2.
So good for him then. So he's worked his way up into the NHL lineup, and I feel like anytime. Look, it's very difficult to play in the NHL, but I feel like making the Tampa Bay Lightning roster or having Julien Brisebois being the guy calling you up from the minors, I just feel like that has a little bit of extra weight just because of how good Tampa's been over the last number of years, and how good Julien Brisebois has been at sort of finding these late round draft picks or these prospects that maybe over time have gone unnoticed by other teams. You look at some guys like, Ross Colton and Briere. How do you say that guy's name? Briere Brulot or whatever. The French Canadian kid that they had. Bar Brule. I completely butchered his name. Verhaeghe was one of those guys that I feel like nobody really knew anything about. Then he's like a 4th liner in Tampa. Now he's a 30-goal scorer, once he goes to Florida for a bigger role. So, I don't know. I just feel like anytime I see Brisebois do something, whether it was bringing in Tanner Jeannot, whether it was the trade he made for Brandon Hagel, everyone's like, you're giving up so much for these guys. I don't know. I just give Brisebois the benefit of the doubt, basically, when I see him.
Nick Paul, too.
Doing Nick Paul. Yeah. So, I guess I just give him that respect because of what he's done and how he's built his teams. So for a guy like Chafee to be up in the NHL, getting this cup of coffee, this hopefully extended stay in the NHL, I root for all the college guys, especially these Hockey East players. And if he's your roommate, I mean, I'll have to get some stories from him because I'm sure he has plenty of reasons to shit on you. But good for him, good for him, good for UMass. I'll actually be doing a UMass game Saturday night. So I'll have to ask Greg Carvel about that. He's the head coach for our listeners that aren't familiar with Greg Carvel. He was one of Johnny's coaches. He's a head coach at UMass, was an NHL assistant for a long time, had a lot of people say, low key, he had a huge impact on Zdeno Chara's early years, Erik Karlsson's early years. And I will say, there's a reason UMass has developed and brought in a lot of big time defensemen over the last number of years, whether it was Makar, whether it was, Del Gaijo, who's gotten some NHL love, Ferraro, the kid Scott Morrow there right now, he's going to play in the NHL. So UMass has become
Ryan
a little bit of a Ryan Ufko, although I'm not sure he's a lock to play in the NHL. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, no, it's become a little bit of a defenseman factory, for the NHL over at UMass.
I don't want to make this all about UMass, but Carvey did say last week that Ufko might be the most complete player to come through there since Kale. So that's pretty high praise for Ryan Ufko. But while we're on the topic of college, Colby, I know we wanted to save the BC Beanpot talk for the end, but we do have some questions from Jeremiah Maxwell in the chat. He's got a question for Colby. Win the Beanpot or the Natty? What means more to BU?
Well,
it's got to be the Natty, right?
The national championship means more to BU, but when you start the year at college at that level, there's certain benchmarks that these programs sort of have throughout the year, trophies they can win, and the Beanpot is usually the first one you can win unless you play in a holiday tournament, or a beginning of the season tournament. So it's a big deal, Jeremiah. It's a major goal and a trophy and a championship that you want to win. And it's funny because after they got swept by BC, I was texting and talking with some friends and people around the program, and then on last Tuesday, and I think you even tweeted me during the game, Jeremiah. You saw that I did the BU Northeastern game, and so after the game, I was talking with Jack Parker, who's the legendary coach at BU's family members. His two daughters were at the game. One of his daughters' son is Shane LaChance, who plays for BU. He's a freshman, really good freshman, NHL draft pick. And his daughter, Allie Parker, said, last time I checked, after the game, we were talking with Shane. She said, last time I checked, you don't win trophies in January. Trophy season doesn't start until February. So that just gives you an idea, the mindset of somebody who is BU hockey through and through. Jack Parker's family, his daughters, they went to BU. They've lived his whole career. They've been close to the program forever. Now her nephew and her sister's son plays for the program. So it sucks to get swept by them during the regular season, Jeremiah, but to come back and win in the Beanpot and give yourself a chance to play in that Beanpot championship game, I think is huge. It means a lot, and it's something that you use as a momentum builder because, look, you're close to the NCAA playoffs and the NCAA tournament. So it's a good question, but I think the Beanpot is a stepping stone. You want to win as much as you can, that regular season trophy, playoff trophy, championship. If you can be triple crown, quadruple, crown winner, that's obviously always important. The last BU team to do all four was actually my team in 2009. So it's a challenging feat to have. So yeah, we'll see what happens next Monday. And I think later in the show, we'll get back more into the Beanpot. We won't go there now because we've got our guy, Frank Seravalli, who's about to make his regular Tuesday appearance on our show, and we have lots to ask him about. So without further ado, Frank, what's going on this morning? We were worried there, but it was our error. We forgot to send you the link. Sorry about that.
Yeah, all good. No worries.
Before we ask you anything, Frank, I do want to apologize for ditching on the dinner bill this weekend. I got a lot of shit for that yesterday, so that's my bad. I'll Venmo you some money for dinner last week. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no,
for taking me out.
My pleasure. I was gonna say thanks for the welcome, guys. Certainly better than what I got on the Pat McAfee show yesterday.
You did Pat McAfee yesterday?
No, did you see it? He referred to me as, quote, that thing.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah,
no way.
They were ripping me for my
Crosby take
on Sid.
No way. Oh, I gotta go back,
quote,
and watch
that thing. That Canadian thing is what he said.
But you're from Philly, and did they play your clip?
Nope.
So they just said that thing who was
and he
on
said
Sidney Crosby.
Sidney Crosby can do whatever he wants. How dare you?
I'm sure you didn't lose sleep over that one.
No, I was laughing. I was like, this guy can't even form a sentence, and yet he wants to attack me. All right.
Well, you did get a lot of heat for that. People were finding pictures of you from when you were like 19 years old and tweeting them, and they were showing up on my feed, and I just did not understand the significance of any of
leave
that.
it to Yinzers. I mean, that's how it works.
I just think it's a Philly hatred thing, Frank. I just think
people were saying that about me, and I'm like, dude, I don't care who wins and loses. I promise you, and there's no part of me that has any vitriol at all towards Sidney Crosby. He's a quite literally a near perfect human being, and he's no one's questioning his character or anything like that. My only point was, if any other player at any point in time, and more specifically from any other country, had decided to just not show up for the first day of All-Star festivities, like Sidney Crosby did for the player draft on Thursday, that person would be roundly criticized. They would.
Well, totally fair.
If it was Alex Ovechkin in his prime, they'd say, why are you too big for the NHL? If it was Austin Matthews and the game wasn't hosted in Toronto, they'd say, who does this guy think he is? But my only point was, because it's Sid, no one says a word, and apparently it's not okay to say a word.
Well, I think it's okay to have an opinion about anything.
Apparently not. Didn't you know that's not how this works anymore?
I mean, listen, I did see.
You can't attack beatified saints.
It was crawling all over my X feed, and I was just kind of shaking my head and laughing about it, because, listen, you call it like it is, and I know you well. You're not a Flyers fan whatsoever.
I'm not a fan of anything except hockey.
I know. And I get it.
I don't put anyone on a pedestal, right or wrong. I don't bow down to anyone. I don't kiss anyone's ass. I just do my job, and I do it as I see fit. And if that gets me in hot water, fine. If people don't like it, great. But I am who I am, for better or worse. And like I said yesterday on my pod, if you want to attack me for my weight, trust me, you can't hate me any more than I already hate myself. It's not possible. So don't worry about it.
I mean, well, we're gonna have to get you on the Pat McAfee show now. Yeah. That I feel like needs to happen. You've got to get an opportunity, and he seems like he's kind of all about those types of moments, Pat McAfee. So I don't know. Maybe that's something we can make happen. I mean,
I don't care. I'll go on for sure. I'll say the same exact thing I've said consistently.
Was this on the show when he had? Because he was I watched.
He had PK Subban on, and he was asked about that.
And I have to go back and watch this.
And what did he say about it? What did Subban say?
He said Sidney Crosby can do whatever he wants.
Okay.
Which I do agree with, but you can also disagree with. I think Crosby can do what he wants. I think Crosby.
Well, he did whatever he wanted. Yeah, nobody's saying he can't do whatever he wants, but
he can be criticized for it, for sure.
Exactly. Nobody's above criticism. Listen, we live in a world where everybody wants to talk about what everybody else does. Like in the media, they talk about the coaches, the players. Why can't players turn around and then talk about a media? I don't understand why people get upset when a coach comes at a media member for a bad question, because media members come at coaches for what they perceive to be bad decisions all the time. I think it's all completely fair game. I've
been saying that forever. The media, our job, quote unquote, is to hold people to account. Why are we above being held to account?
No, we're not. And we have a lot of writers and people in the media that think they are above being held accountable, and they get very upset anytime that they are held accountable. And
it's not that they're upset. I think they're uncomfortable and don't know how to handle it.
Most people don't like, for sure. Most people don't like confrontation. I mean,
look, you and Jonny signed up for a whole hour of it every day.
I mean, listen, I'll be honest. I don't like confrontation. I think I would.
We could tell.
Yeah. I think I would crap my pants if Laviolette came at me one day. You know what I mean?
Just be ready, because like a question that you asked last night, at some point you're going to go from being, oh, hey, here's Jonny, the young guy who's the cool guy in the scrums, to, hey, here's this know-it-all who played at Mercyhurst who thinks that he knows everything better than everyone else. I'm just telling you, because I was around Peter Laviolette every day for like 5 years. Mm-hmm. It will happen to you at some point.
I know, and I fear that day as a media.
What are you going to do? Why are you going to put your tail between your legs?
Why do you fear that?
Honestly, I think it's just being new to it. And once it happens, then you just kind of put it behind you and you move on. But I think because, this is my first full season covering the NHL, so it hasn't happened to me yet. And once that does happen, it's just going to be another day, But that first time, I think everyone's afraid of a little bit of, heat coming back at you the first time when it's bound to happen at some point. Is that not fair to say?
Well, I mean,
doesn't mean I'm not going to, the Rangers won a big game last night.
Worse than anyone else will. So like, maybe this should just be like some armor that you have now that you're building.
He knows that I love him though.
Yeah. But no, I think I built up
maybe
enough,
Lavi loves you secretly.
But again, like, I think, I've asked questions in losses about positivity to Laviolette, and he's totally ignored it because he thinks there's no positives in a loss. So last night I took a different approach, and the Rangers had a big comeback win in overtime, but the goal against was a pretty alarming goal against. I mean, anyone who plays hockey knows that you should never get scored on when you're when you're against a set breakout. But if there's one guy that can score a goal against a 1-3-1, it's probably Nathan MacKinnon, who's an absolute worst.
There's two.
Connor McDavid as well. And we'll show the goal right here. MacKinnon gets a ton of speed through the neutral zone. The Rangers go on this 1-3 run all the time. A lot of heat was given on Keandre Miller for not getting a body on Nathan MacKinnon. But listen, I think anytime, Colby, you can probably talk more to it. Anytime a defenseman standing flat-footed, I don't care who the forward is, it's very, very hard to make full body contact on that guy, especially a guy with as much speed and power as Nathan MacKinnon. And then you look at Braden Schneider's gap on the play. He's like 10 feet back on the blue line. So it's so tough to defend a guy with that much speed, coming in full throttle like Nathan MacKinnon was at that time. And, Laviolette, we didn't see the Rangers jump back in the 1-3-1 at all in the rest of the game. So it was clear that Laviolette made some adjustment. And I was curious to see what he had to say about slowing down arguably the fastest team in the NHL.
Just touched on how fast Colorado is, and they scored that one goal tonight on a set breakout. So
yep.
Kind of scores as Nathan MacKinnon.
Yeah.
Is that more of a breakdown on the team end, or is that?
That's, to be honest, it's on me. It's, we knew what was coming at us, and sometimes I feel like I can do a better job explaining things. And so we were in place, we were in position, but after that happened, we made a quick adjustment inside the room, able to handle that speed a little bit more. I think some people for a team, you could have a game plan in place, and then we should have maybe thought about that with his speed and the way he attacks the neutral zone, that maybe we should have just made an adjustment. So that's on me. We made that adjustment after the period.
I just want to say one quick thing. I've never heard any coach take full responsibility for a goal against like that.
Well, I was going to stop you there because I was going to say, I think that's a BS answer. And it's great. It's great on him that he took responsibility for it, but he's not the guy out there executing. And if you're going to get picked apart as not just a defenseman, but the middle end and guy on the boards in the 1-3-1, that's on you executing. That's not the coach. That play, that setup wasn't designed for one person to skate through the whole thing. That's poor player execution and a coach jumping on the grenade. That's how I view it. Colby, am I wrong?
Yeah, look, I think in a 1-3-1 situation there, I think, somebody's got to make a play. If everybody's back, somebody's got to make a play. But I think that pointing the finger at the defenseman who is standing in the last line of defense is completely flat-footed. But I also, honestly, Johnny, like listening to Laviolette talk, I'm not thrilled with his answer, because I actually sense that answer is a little bit of the easy way out, because I think he probably didn't want to call anybody out. And so he just aided himself.
100%.
Because like, I don't find that to be super genuine the way that he replied to that. I really don't. If anything, he's sitting there saying, yeah, my players couldn't execute what I had. They were in the right position, but they couldn't execute. So, but I think I've never covered Laviolette. Like, I've never been in a city, in a market, and covered the team on a day-to-day basis like him. I've got tons and tons of friends who have played for him, so I've heard so many different things about the guy. But, like, I don't know. Like, I would think a 1-3-1 in the neutral zone, which is what LA did the first half of the year and did against McDavid. And I've seen teams try to do against McDavid. I mean, that's one of the only ways to be successful against players like McDavid and players like McKinnon. Yeah, you can't count on the last guy back who's completely flat-footed to make the play. Somebody in the neutral zone has to make the play.
When you're squirting through two guys in the neutral zone, it's on them.
I just thought the question was, originally I was thinking, is it a breakdown by the team, or is it more of a credit to the skill of Nathan McKinnon? I mean, you've seen defensemen in the NHL talk about what it's like when Nathan McKinnon is coming at you at full speed. I mean, there's a clip of Alex Pietrangelo in the Winter Classic 2 years ago, literally going, oh boy, when he sees McKinnon get that puck before going in the neutral zone, and then he has no chance of even stopping him. Like, there are some guys where you just have to accept that they're much harder to stop.
Yeah, listen, you have to accept that you might just get beat, but the reality is with a player, with those types of players, sitting back doesn't actually work. You've got to be in his pants. You need a guy.
I think that's a lot of that was saying,
who's going to mirror him as he swings behind the net, and do your best, because most likely your best isn't going to be good enough, because we're talking about, the two most powerfully dynamic skaters, maybe of the three, put Makar in there in the NHL, but I don't know. Like, I don't think this is as big of a deal as I don't know. Like, I
don't think it's a big deal. Okay, first off, kudos to you for asking the question and framing it that way, because not everyone sees the game as a reporter that played the game that can ask a nuanced question like that. That's one. Two, as we just talked about, it's kind of clear that there was an execution breakdown, and rather than pin it on a player, the coach jumps on the grenade. And three, we know from John Tortorella earlier this season, after John Tortorella, Peter Laviolette's rival, that those guys are loath to give credit to the opposition. Connor McDavid torched the Flyers for 5 points, 5 primary points, and he couldn't say anything nice about him. Couldn't say anything at all about him after the game. So if you think Peter Laviolette's going to stand there and give flowers to Nathan McKinnon after picking through 5 different guys on the ice, basically going 1-on-5, that's not going to happen either.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually asked him when they played the Oilers, or prior to the game against the Oilers earlier this year, I asked, when you coach against a player like Connor McDavid, is there ever a moment on the bench? This is a dumb question that I asked him. Was there ever a moment on the bench where you kind of sit back and just like say wow to yourself with how talented McDavid is? And he said, basically, if you're saying wow, I'm saying something else. I'm pretty pissed at what the result of a play would be.
That's a good answer
for me to react that way. That's a good answer. But this one specifically, so Colby asked me last night when I sent him the clip, did you ask a follow-up about the adjustments that were made? Before I asked the question, he talked about how he started matching Mika Zibanejad's line against McKinnon in the second and third. And you're talking about a Colorado Avalanche team was one of the highest scoring offenses in the NHL. Incredible speed, incredibly dynamic, and they only put up 1 goal last night. So clearly the adjustment that was made did help the Rangers defend. Obviously, they got a lot of saves from Jonathan Quick, but I thought it was, yes, it's him protecting his players for sure, but he also spoke about how tactical he was in between periods to not allow his team to stand flat-footed against a team with skaters like Makar, McKinnon, and even, like a Mikko Rantanen. Like, I thought that was a really genuine response, even though it could have been a cover-up to protect the players.
And you also caught up with Cale Makar yesterday. You have a story going up on dailyfaceoff.com today. What's that about?
Yeah, it should be going up today. At some point, I spoke to Cale Makar.
Going up this morning.
Yes. This morning, I spoke to Cale Makar and Devon Taves, who are arguably the best defensive pair in the NHL. Everyone knows about their on-ice play, but I don't think many people know about what they do off the ice. So I got to catch up with. I don't want. What am I supposed to tell the whole story?
Yeah, tell us about this. Not the whole story, but give us a preview. Like, give someone listening a reason to go read it.
I found out Devon Taves does a lot of work in the community with Freedom Service dogs, which I thought was very interesting. He matches up people like military veterans, people with disabilities, with customized puppies, which is something that I feel like Colby would actually find very interesting because Colby's a big puppy guy.
He just became your new favorite player.
And, I found out that Makar is a decent dog sitter and that Devon Taves would never let his goalies near any of his dogs because the goalies are weird enough, apparently. And apparently Eric Johnson has 10 dogs of his own.
Wait, what do you mean he wouldn't let them near dogs because they're
like he would not let the goalies near?
What's he worried that they're gonna do? Like some weird peanut butters type of shit there? Or?
Oh my god!
I don't know. We didn't really get into the specifics. We didn't get into the specifics. And then Cale mentioned, or actually it was funny. Bowen Byram was right next to Cale when I was talking to him, and Emily Kaplan had a viral moment a couple years ago when she asked Cale about any like impromptu purchases he's made since being in the NHL, and he talked about stopping and getting a Slurpee. That was his response. So I asked Cale if he has any like prized possessions since he's made his new contract, and Bowen Byram chimed in and was like, he's got a couple nice shacks. And I thought that was pretty funny, like a couple nice houses or whatever. So it was just cool to hear about their life off the ice because those are two guys who are pros, maybe a little bit less exciting than others in the league. They don't party as much or, go crazy. So it was cool to hear what they do off the ice and how the team is watching this new show. I'm blanking on it on Apple. It's the World War show, something of the air, I think it's called.
Good work there, journalist.
Well, you put me on the spot. I had it written down. I had it written down. Masters of the Air. Masters of the Air is what it's called.
Does any team in the NHL consume less alcohol than the Colorado Avalanche?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
I don't think Nathan MacKinnon. It's probably been years since he had a drink. I'm not exaggerating.
Yeah, no, and that shows in his play, right? Like, what's funny? I was actually talking to my roommate about it yesterday. How Colby, I'm sure you've heard this too. A lot of guys say, "Oh, alcohol doesn't affect me. I'm still able to, be impactful in the game." Is like, yeah, you can still be a successful hockey player and drink, but like if you don't, like, you can be a freak of nature like Nathan MacKinnon. Is that not right? Like.
Jaromir Jagr, when I would spend time with him, he would always say, from the time you take your first sip, it's still in your body 5 days later. Mm-hmm. So, people talk about, kind of playing guilty the next day or whatever. It's like, no, it impacts you longer than that. And I think for some of these guys, like they're so careful about what they do and don't do and put in their body. And they should be. Like MacKinnon is the walking testament to how his game and his life has changed since he changed his diet. But he's so militant and so intense about it that it's rubbed off, I think, on so many other guys in that room, his sort of secrets of how he goes about his business, that I think it's helped take that team in a totally different direction.
Well, yeah, I mean, the word culture.
Those guys kind of remind me of like MacKinnon in particular. He reminds me of like a Novak Djokovic or a Rafael Nadal, just with how intense and how militant they are. For any tennis fans out there, these guys are another level of preparation. And when I say preparation, everything that goes into that with their diet and their sleep and their hydration and sports science and this and that. So certain guys, they just go to another level. And it's why MacKinnon is, a top 3-4 player in the NHL for a number of years now.
And the main point of my story was just.
Oh, there was a point to your story. I was curious about that.
Well, I didn't want to play spoiler, but when you're around a team like the Colorado Avalanche, and I've been around a couple NHL teams now, the word culture always gets thrown around by coaches and by management and, the higher ups in the NHL. But most times the successful teams, the culture is built within the players. And the one team I've been around where you can actually sense that is the Colorado Avalanche. Like they're all on the same page because of the guys like Nathan MacKinnon, because of the culture that the players over the last 10 years in that organization have built. And that's something that Devon Taves kind of spoke on as well.
I don't know that any team is as singularly dominated in terms of their mission and mandate as Nathan MacKinnon controls like even like little things. Like I had a friend who was standing near their bus as they were leaving a game earlier this season, and someone said, "Hey, what time does the bus leave?" And the bus driver said, "Whenever Nathan MacKinnon says so." That was a road game, and it was like, this guy controls everything. It's kind of amazing to see. He's not the captain. Gabriel Landeskog is. He's been out for a while, but man, he's changed everything about the way that team runs. Little things, big things, diet, sleeping, whatever it might be, and you can see the results.
Well, and you know, you look at Jared Bednar as a little bit more of a laid back guy. That's just kind of his approach, and I think I don't know. The GM now is McFarland, right, Frank? Chris McFarland, is that's the general manager of the Avs now?
Yep.
I don't know much about him. I know you had him on your pod. I know you had him on Frankly Speaking.
I've had him on twice, actually, and if you're interested, his career is fascinating. He started out in the NHL office as an intern, and he worked then in NHL production, so on the media side. But he worked in the NHL office in the mid 90s when it was so incredibly small that he eventually, went to law school at night, got himself in line to, kind of rise within the organization. And then when they had an expansion franchise pop up in Columbus, he got hired there in their hockey ops department, worked his way up, and then became the assistant GM in Colorado. So a fascinating path. And he talks all about it and sort of how now he tries to give back to guys that he was going around at meetings, like literally putting resumes under GM's hotel doors to get a shot. And so anyway, sorry to cut you off, but
no,
kind of
it's
an
okay.
amazing
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. I don't know him. Like, I mean, I know Joe Sakic, who's also kind of a laid back guy. So I think the mix of McKinnon's kind of serious, I think the word you used was militant, Frank. I think that's a great way to describe it. I think it works. It gives him the opportunity to kind of do that. So
not every place would be comfortable with that.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Most places would be like, hey, we tell you what to do, not the other way around.
No, and I think obviously it's worked there. They've been a good team for a while. They had a cup and they'll challenge for one this year. But look, I don't want to spend the whole time we have with you talking about Johnny's Rangers and the Avs. So there are some other things that have kind of happened over the last couple of days, Frank, that me personally, like I'd like a little bit of clarity on, and I'm sure audiences would like a little bit of clarity on. And the first thing that I kind of wanted to ask you about, we saw yesterday some announcements of cap relief for certain teams that have players involved in the Canada World Junior charges and incident. What exactly does that mean, Frank, as far as being given cap relief? Like, how do the players count on the roster? How does their money, like, are they still getting paid? If you could just kind of dummy that down for us and really for our audience and shed some light on what that all means.
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. Now, essentially, it's almost for those teams, aside from writing the checks to the players, like they don't exist anymore as part of their cap. So they continue to get paid biweekly. All of them have their contracts that expire at the end of the season. They had already received a roster exemption, meaning they could replace those guys on the 23-man roster without penalty. So they were moved to non-roster status. And then now yesterday, they were notified that they will be receiving cap relief, which essentially kind of makes them like they're on LTIR, where you can then take their full salary and replace that same amount on your roster. So it's a big deal in the sense that if you're a team like New Jersey who has two players, even though they didn't make, a whole ton of money on their cap, it's not as big of a deal for the Flyers or the Calgary Flames with Carter Hart and Dylan Dubé because, they're probably not spending to the limit and they're, not trying to add pieces at the deadline. But if these teams were in different positions, that would be an incredibly significant development. But for right now, it's, it is what it is.
in theory, a team like the Flyers could use Carter Hart's is it 5 million?
$3.97 million.
Okay, so let's just call it 4. Let's just use the number 4 for even. That's $4 million you could use to facilitate to help with assets, or his contract is set to expire at the end of the season, so it comes off the books anyway.
Yep.
But that gives you
they weren't spending to the cap.
Flexibility.
They weren't spending to the cap anyway, so they did have some room.
Gotcha. Okay. So basically it's just, all that money is given back. The players will continue to get paid. And I guess that will get worked out on the back end with CBA and revenue. And I'm people a lot smarter than me with math will figure that kind of thing out.
It's above my pay grade. I have no idea how that stuff works with this, but thank you for explaining, Frank, because I think a lot of people are confused with how everything is kind of being operated right now, especially this time of year at the trade deadline coming up. So I know it's a pretty big deal with everything going on, obviously, and it's tough to describe to just the typical NHL fan. Even people like me, it's tough to kind of grasp. So thank you for doing that. And Colby, do we want to talk about the Edmonton Oilers tonight? Going for the
I'd like to just stay with the news topics.
You mean the biggest game in Vegas this week?
I'd like to stay with the news topics first, Frank, because during Toronto's All-Star weekend, I think we were all actually together when this happened. We talked about it on our show the day before it happened. Todd McClellan gets fired. That's obviously old news, but what's new news is yesterday, Rob Blake had some comments. He basically said, I'm aware that if this team doesn't win, my job could be on the line. I'm paraphrasing. They named Jim Hiller as the interim head coach. And then I think yesterday there was a report that DJ Smith will be brought in to be an assistant coach for the rest of the season. Or was he given, just give us an idea, Frank. Like, is Hiller going to be the interim coach for the rest of the year? Are they starting a coaching search? Like what's going on out in LA?
It's a mess. And they're trying to sift through it. Jim Hiller is going to remain as the interim coach for the remainder of the year. DJ Smith comes in as the assistant to replace Hiller on the bench. And I think really the biggest headline that comes from all of this is that the LA Kings are feeling the heat. The temperature is being turned up on Rob Blake and the rest of the organization to show some tangible results. They had the rebuild that they went through, and you could say maybe the first year they made the playoffs a little bit ahead of schedule. They lose to the Oilers in Game 7 in the first round. They're out. They've made some pretty significant moves year after year. Kevin Fiala, then this year PL Dubois, and they've traded significant pieces. They've, spent a ton of money. They've moved out some prospects. They need more results. And the fact that they started the season so well and then have really not just fallen back to earth, but the wheels have fallen off in terms of their approach. This has been, a team in the bottom 10 in the league for the last 6 to 8 weeks now. They've been unable to get out of this spiral. And I'm surprised that it ended up being on the coach. And I think, to Rob Blake's point, what that does is it squarely puts the bullseye on him. But this is a team that I think is significantly underachieving this year in spite of some of the holes that they have on their roster.
So, Frank, let me just understand this, the power structure in LA. Luc Robitaille is the president of the team, correct?
Yes, but he also holds a business title as well.
Okay, so most likely, my questions are here. Was an interim head coach put in place because Rob Blake was not allowed to hire another head coach because they're basically saying, like, your time is ticking? Like, what?
I don't think so.
How? So this is, he wasn't told he couldn't hire another head coach other than an interim.
No, and keep in mind, Todd McClellan just got an extension before the season started. So he's being paid all of next year as well. And I think they didn't want to be in a spot where they were paying 3 coaches at once.
Got it. And then Luc Robitaille, is he the guy that ultimately would pull the trigger if he wanted to move on from Rob Blake, or does that come from AEG, like ownership?
Oh, I mean, typically the impetus to make a change comes with a push from ownership and wanting to make that. But yeah, it would ultimately come down to Luc Robitaille and their group to make the decision. I think it's a little bit premature to speculate on that part of it, even though the bullseye is on him. He's not the only one. We've talked all year about Jarmo Kekalainen and the Blue Jackets, who's longer tenured than Blake by 4 years. But this Kings team, I think the tough part is look at their division. Look at where the Oilers are, having won 24 out of their last 27 games. Look at the Golden Knights when they get healthy. And then now look at the Canucks, who have really put this Kings team swimming in the wild card sea. That's what they're looking at right now. And that's an uncomfortable position to be in for a team that had some pretty lofty and significant expectations this year to take a step forward. I wonder how they feel about their decision to make their bet on goaltending and Cam Talbot right now. It started off so well, but it was almost like he played so well and they played the wheels off of him that what you've been seeing the last little bit has been a significant correction back to the mean. And then the other part of the heat that's on him is from the PL Dubois trade that quite clearly hasn't worked out and has not only hurt the Kings, but has put the Winnipeg Jets in a position where they're one of the Stanley Cup contenders now.
Frank, if I were to ask you yes or no right now, you think the Kings make the playoffs?
Yes, and it's not even a question because, first off, I don't know who's even in the driver's seat for the 8th seed, let alone 2 teams that would come in and knock the Kings out. I think they're too talented to miss. But what it does call into question is what are their viable options or opportunity to break through and get into the second round? Because right now, to me, there's the 6 teams at the top, the Kings, and then whoever finishes in the West as the 8th spot.
They're 2 points ahead of St. Louis and Nashville right now, and the Kraken are creeping up a little bit. They're 4 points back of LA. And then the teams like Arizona, Calgary, and Minnesota are a little bit more toward the bottom. But, I mean, this Arizona team, people said, they're a sleeper pick to make a push for the playoffs this season before it started. And they've been, a little bit in that mix, flirting with the wild card spot all year. Like,
they're not my sleeper team.
Who's your sleeper team?
The Kraken. I think if you have the Blues and the Preds potentially selling off pieces, the Kraken, I mean, you could make the argument the Coyotes would be there as well, but they're also going to sell off pieces. The Coyotes simply aren't strong enough right now to just say, hey, we're going to keep our pending UFAs, even no matter what the return is, that they can just roll the dice and say, hey, we're going to let these guys walk for nothing. They're not at that position asset management wise yet to be able to play that card. And so you could really see the Blues, Coyotes, and Preds all sell off. Not to say that means it's going to crush their chances to make the playoffs, but I think if the Kraken sort of stick with it, that there's a window there for them to get in.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I thought you were going to jump in, Colby.
It's okay, Johnny. I got it. I know you're a little sleepy today, Frank. You missed the beginning part of the show where Johnny Marbles couldn't complete a sentence. So
totally botched the intro to today's show.
You gave it the old Pat McAfee. Nice. All right.
Exactly. It's funny. Well, look, Frank, I like hearing about these situations. There's always these different power dynamics happening in these NHL front offices. No 2 situations are alike. I've seen that firsthand working for a couple organizations. So always good to get your insight. We appreciate your time today. We won't keep you on here any longer. Make sure you check out Daily Faceoff Live Monday through Friday at noon. Frank and Tyler Yaremchuk. Every now and again, I fill in. Frank and I argue a little bit. It's always a good time. We appreciate it, Frank. Thanks for sticking with us today.
See you guys.
Thanks, Frank. All right, Colby, we still got a lot to touch on today. We got Sheldon Keefe and the Maple Leafs lost last night. We got the
Let's go right to that. I want to talk about the Leafs. I don't know why I get so much enjoyment at Leafs suffering.
I know why.
I just get so much enjoyment out of it these days. partly because we were just in Toronto and everybody was feeling so good about the Leafs. They won a couple of games going into break. Samsonov has played better. They're not giving up 5 or 6 goals a game, and they didn't again last night. So give him credit for that last night. But man, they lose a tight game to the Islanders, a team that has absolutely had their number in the worst way over the last recent history. But some really, really strong comments from Sheldon Keefe after this this goal by Kyle McLean was his first NHL goal, right?
First NHL goal. He's actually a buddy of mine, so it was really cool to see. And his dad.
Freeze the film right here. So I not to cut you off, but we are running a video, and then you can get back to your Jonny feel good story. At the top of your screen, 37 in blue. Okay, Timothy Liljegren. He is the only defenseman out with this power play. Okay, and as the only defenseman out with your power play, you have to know the situation. You have to know the time on the clock. This is Pee-wee level shit. Rule 101, especially when Willie Nylander's the other point guy. Now, one other thing I'd like to point out about this play that to me is incredibly selfish is that Willie Nylander stayed out the entire 2 minutes of the power play because this is the second unit. So he's still on the ice. And usually the last, 15 seconds of power play number 2, another defenseman will jump on the ice to make sure once you start 5-on-5, you've got 2 defensemen out on the ice. So a couple of really, really major brain farts. Now roll the tape a little here, Vic, but watch what happens. Liljegren, he gets caught cheating. He's outside the dot for a brief second there. Major no-no. And then McLean just pops out of the box. Go ahead, roll the tape. And they give up a breakaway goal to go behind after having a power play. So you don't score on the power play, and then you give up a goal right off the heels of the power play. It's a major momentum kick in the balls. And again, this just continues to be sloppy, selfish mistakes, whether it's Liljegren cheating for offense, whether it's Willie Nylander, Mr. 8-year, no move, no trade, staying out on the ice. Okay, not seeing the situation, not coming off the ice to get another defenseman out there. And look, Sheldon Keefe has had enough. He's fucking bullshit about it. And let's listen to his quotes after the game.
Is it frustrating when you lose track of where the penalty clock is and you let a guy slip behind you? Is that something at this point in the year that shouldn't happen anymore?
At this point of the year, this is the National Hockey League. Like, that's Pee-wee stuff. It's nothing to do with the season or anything like that. You play on the power play in the National Hockey League, they should not get behind you coming out of the penalty box.
All losses are tough, Sheldon, no matter how they happen, but any more difficult given that you guys tied the game late and there's turnover in the defensive zone.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. We played well enough to win the game, but we do just enough to lose, right? Like second goal, third goal. Those are gifts. You can't give gifts to the goalie's playing the way he is in the other end. Goals so hard to come by. You battle your way back to tie the game.
Yeah,
you can't do that.
Well, look, I agree with them, Jonny. They did play well enough to win and just dumb enough to lose. I think that's a great way to put it for Sheldon Keefe. They got goaltending. Nobody can blame the goaltending last night. You only give up 2 goals, and then of course, I mean the nail in the coffin, right? Mm-hmm. Pierre Engvall, a guy who's been widely criticized in Long Island for this. What do you get, a 6-year deal?
Me and Frank got shit on last week for talking about Engvall because I was under the impression, at least last season, that Islander fans loved him. But he gets a tribute last night, like a crappy video.
Everybody, I mean, listen. Honestly, everybody gets a tribute. I played 3 games in Colorado. If I went back to Colorado right now to a game, I'd probably get a tribute. I mean, they're handing out tributes like fucking Tic Tacs now. It's kind of embarrassing.
It's true, but all the reporters also at the game said, like, not one clap was had when Engvall.
Well, how would any of the reporters at the game know? Their heads are fucking buried in their Twitter feeds. Don't get me started on
reporters.
You're
gonna yell at me for not answering your text last night?
The reality about the reporters at hockey games, they have no idea what's going on in the building. I sat in the press box in Chicago numerous times in my life, in my career, in my state in Chicago, and the military salute would come up. Okay. The entire building goes on their feet except for the writers in the press box. Everybody gets up for the military salute. Players can stand up on the benches. Okay. Everybody stands up. The writers in the press box in Chicago, they didn't stand up. They would sit there, type away. They get their headphones on, whatever, because none of them even pay attention to the game. They've already got their stories written. So I'm not real interested in hearing what the writers said about who did or didn't clap. Give me a fucking break, okay?
All right.
Like, watch the game and pay attention before you tell me who did or didn't clap. I know I'm going off on a tangent right now, but that always really pissed me off in Chicago when the writers, all of them, would not stand up for the military salute. It made my fucking blood boil. You can talk now because I'm just going to say something that's going to end up probably getting me in trouble.
That one seems personal for sure. I got a dirty look when I was clapping during the national anthem in the press box like 2 weeks ago.
Good. Fuck them. If you don't like the national anthem, fuck off. Just fuck off. Leave.
Let me cut you off though. Let me cut you off because I know
get out of the building.
I know where this is headed. But our producer Vic did let us know that heading into this game, Pierre Engvall hadn't registered a point in more than a month, and the Islanders hadn't defeated any team in regulation in more than a month. So that just adds insult to injury for the Leafs' loss last night, especially after a feel-good weekend. You host the All-Star festivities. Austin Matthews wins MVP. The Leafs guys win the All-Star game, and then you come out and have a disappointing loss like this. Just typical Toronto stuff, right? Like, I mean, the stories just kind of write themselves at this point. Toronto just can't find a way to find any consistency. And they were a team that, Colby, you said in the show yesterday, like they have a chance to get going here, and that's a pretty bad way to start, right? So, like what do you do from here when your coach just is not shy now? He's not really protecting the players anymore in the media. Like, is it kind of a coach versus player situation right now in Toronto?
It's not his job.
He's not getting fired.
He's not getting fired this season. There's absolutely no reason to fire him. It's February here. Like, what do we, I mean, sure, you're going to get an interim, one of your assistants going to be head coach for a few weeks or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I don't foresee that happening. So, look, it's going to be a circus in Toronto the rest of the season. Excuse me. It's going to continue to be a circus. It is what it is. It'll give us something to talk about. They're going to be problematic. They're not a cup contender. They're not a serious hockey team. Let's just call it like it is. It's going to be another year of disappointed hockey fans in Maple Leaf Square, which is a shame because, again, Toronto is the Mecca. Hockey people are so passionate there. I do think it would be great to see a Stanley Cup back on Canadian soil, whether it's Edmonton or Toronto. I think Edmonton's closer right now for obvious reasons, but we'll see what happens. I mean, certainly enjoyed my time there for the break or for the week, the All-Star weekend. Great restaurants, good company for the most part. For the most part. So yeah, and the Leafs, man, they'll always give us something to talk about.
I actually want to read some comments in the chat about the Leafs. Jeremiah Maxwell said, "My boy, Hot Take Hockey, John Viveros wants Keefe out." I'm sure all the Leafs fans want Keefe out, but at this point of the year, it's kind of tough. Like a little over 30 games left. And then Matt Mugno, who actually is a writer, said, "Colby, I'll tell you, writing the game recaps and live tweeting is close to pointless with the accessibility of watching games now. So frustrating." So that's hearing from a writer himself, which is pretty interesting as well. And then actually we have one a little off topic, but Jared Phillips wants to know what your hat is.
It's an old company that I started years back called Endeavor. And it's just a great hat. It's kind of just a go-to wear around the house hat. It's actually got holes in it at this point. It's a hat that I made one of one. So in my old textile days, we'll call it. But I think let's keep it on the hockey talk here, Johnny boy.
Well, let's tee up tonight's biggest game. Probably there are a ton of games in the NHL tonight. There are 8 across the board, but the last game of the night is the Edmonton Oilers and the Vegas Golden Knights, which is going to be or should be the most watched game of the evening as the Oilers go for a record 17 straight wins. I think they'll get it. Vegas right now is still dealing with a ton of injuries. The Oilers, obviously have been playing the best hockey in the NHL and are number one on Colby's power rankings. So clearly they should be the favorites tonight because Colby says so. But I do think they go into Vegas and win that game and get the streak. I mean, listen, Connor McDavid this year, he's different. And we could say that about years past, but the last 2 years, the Edmonton Oilers end up losing to the eventual Stanley Cup champion. There's no excuses anymore. These guys want to win. They want a Stanley Cup. And, you can talk about the streak and whatnot, but they're just playing good hockey and they're playing the right way. And I think that's even more important than going for 17 straight, is that they're playing the right way leading into the playoffs.
Yeah, and they're not going to win the next 30 in a row, but I don't think they're going to be real streaky. I don't foresee them, going on 8-game winning streaks and 5-game losing streaks. I think they've completely settled into their identity. I think they've completely settled into their structure. And a lot of it is just discipline. And I don't mean discipline staying out of the penalty box. I mean discipline with the puck in the hard, high traffic areas of the ice. Discipline means not looking for that extra play into the middle when it's not there. It means playing the puck in behind the other team's defense rather than losing it at the corner of the blue line. Discipline just means so many different things in the game of hockey, more than just staying out of the penalty box. And I think that's why they've had this major winning streak, and they'll lose eventually, whether it's tonight or whether it's other nights. But ultimately, this is a team that is playing really well and really disciplined, thorough hockey. And when they play that way, and you've got guys like McDavid and Draisaitl, and you're getting saves, and the decor has totally settled in. What Paul Coffey has done with the back end has really made a huge difference there in Edmonton. So I don't expect them to continue to be streaky. And I think that somebody actually asked that in the chat. I lost it now because I think
it was Matt Mugno again.
Yeah. So he wanted to know, like, why are they so, streaky? And I don't see that being the rest of their season continuing to be streaky. So, we'll see what happens tonight against Vegas. The season, the games are about to start picking up. We're about to start seeing more games a night. Obviously, some of the league now has their bye week. I know some had it before, some have it after. It's kind of how it works around the All-Star game. So some guys will be, chilling in the Bahamas here for another couple of days, or Mexico, or wherever they go. But the schedule does start to really pick back up. 8 games tonight. The Flyers really need to stop the bleeding against Florida. Florida, a team that looks like they might be the best team in the league on any given night. I know you and I kind of argue back and forth about this between them and Edmonton. There's no doubt that they're playing, and Colorado, that they're playing some really, really high level hockey right now. There's some other games tonight. Colorado at New Jersey, so they've got a back-to-back. Jersey's looking for any sign of life that they can get, and boy, do they need it. And then you've got Vancouver, Calgary, and we're going to see the
Carolina.
Vancouver, Carolina. I said Calgary because I was thinking about Lindholm and his debut. What do you think of that? Do you think he's the type of player, Johnny, that's going to fit right in, or do you think that could take some time?
It's tough. I mean, he just uplifted his life. We talked about it last week, and you talk about trades and just guys getting accustomed to not only playing a new system or having new teammates on the ice, but it's also a lot of the life away from the rink. And I can't talk on it because I've never been traded, but I feel like you went, pretty deep last week when we talked about the trade after it broke. And, like Patrick Kane, even a guy like him, took some time last year coming to the Rangers. Like, these are human beings, right? Like, and I don't want to make any excuses for them.
No, Johnny, honestly, you're really being fair about this. And I'll just speak to this as someone who has been traded. And obviously I was not an impactful player, but everything changes. You go from living in your house to living in a hotel. You go from having your routine where you have your pregame meal to where am I going to have my pregame meal? Every team has different meeting structures. Some team might meet at 4:15, some team meet at 4:30, power play at 4:45. Everything is different, and hockey players are creatures of habit. So when you throw a player into a new environment, there is a human element. And I do think, generally speaking, it really does take time to get used to playing with other players. I will say this. Lindholm's game to me is such a north-south sort of honest, hard, skilled game is the way I would kind of put him. Like, he's got hard skill. He does not have soft skill, Elias Lindholm. I think he's the type of player that can fit in with a team quicker. I don't think he's the type of player that needs the puck on his stick all the time, needs to be the focal point of the offense all the time. It's not who he is. He's more of a player that goes in, he plays all 200 feet. He's as a centerman, he's always in the low, areas for defensemen. His coverage is always good. Like, I just think he's the type of player that probably fits in a little bit quicker and a little bit sooner than other type of players moving at the deadline. Kane's a bad example because he's kind of a rare bird and rare breed, but usually you see players take a little bit of time to settle into new roles on new teams.
Like a 5-game window, I feel like is pretty fair, right? To fully be accustomed to a team. But I want to just reference dailyfaceoff.com as well, and where they have Lindholm slotted right now. As of now, he's playing second line right wing. According to dailyfaceoff.com, Elias Pettersson is the center on that line, and Ilya Mikheyev is the left wing on that line. So he's not playing center, which I find interesting.
Maybe they want to give him a little less responsibility. And he is the type of player like who can play the wing and center, because again, like, he's going to go win battles on the walls. Like, he's not a guy you have to worry about not being able to battle pucks out along the walls. And a lot of times when you have a center playing winger, they're even more responsible with their low coverage, getting down into the slot, helping out as a weak side winger, sealing the dot line if you're a strong side winger. So sometimes that teams like having that extra center out on the ice. Also, he can always jump in and take draws if Pettersson is thrown out. So we'll keep an eye on those games. Like we said, 8 games tonight. Like only a couple of games last night. I didn't watch NHL last night. I was watching BU and BC. That was an awesome game. Northeastern won the first game of the Beanpot. Macklin Celebrini went off last night, scores the first 2 goals of the hockey game in 6 or 7 minutes. I'm watching Macklin Celebrini, and I'm just going to say this right now, and people are not going to like this. I think I just want to be clear here that I think Macklin Celebrini could play in the NHL as a centerman right now. I think he's that good. I think his compete is that good. I think his details defensively, his strength are that good. He's 17, mind you. Like, Connor Bedard has struggled as a center. Not in the NHL. Bedard is an NHL stud already. His skill is insane, but he's really struggled taking face-offs and at the center position. They've talked a little bit about that throughout the season. Now, granted, he hasn't had anybody to play with, but honestly, right now, I think you could put you could put Macklin Celebrini on a line with Connor Bedard. I think Celebrini would be a better center right now, just in the dot, in the draws, and defensively than Connor Bedard. And Connor Bedard is a phenom star who I think the world of. But that's how good I think and complete of a player Macklin Celebrini is. I am not saying I think Celebrini is a better player or prospect than Bedard. I think Bedard is a step above. I am just saying, as a centerman right now, today, that's what I think. And I want to be clear about that. But that is how highly I think of what Macklin Celebrini's complete game looks like right now as a 17-year-old tearing up the NCAA.
I think it's a good rant, and I don't even want to ruin it. Any final thoughts before we kind of wrap up today's show?
I got nothing, Johnny boy.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone in the chat. Thank you to Frank Seravalli and our producer, Vic. We'll be right back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. So tune in tomorrow. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you guys a little bit later.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.